Hi, everybody. Hope everyone's having a great week. This week, we're talking about actually getting performance measures going in an organization and using them for data-driven decision making. So, along the way this semester, we talked a lot about um, the measurement development process and making sure that you're uh, identifying what results at the population level any particular program is contributing to, and then making sure that your performance measures are tied to the actual activities that are being conducted in a program, and then making sure you have an array of how much, how well, and better off or outcome measures, and ensuring that these measures are counterbalanced to the extent necessary. Um, but once all that happens, what do you do with all this stuff? Once you develop them, what do you do? Uh, Part of the lecture this week will be Ann McIntyre, Lanner, and I presenting uh, some material we presented at the National Public Performance Conference in Boston last year. But there's a piece that I wanted to do before we get into that uh, presentation. And that is, so how do you actually start the process of getting things going, uh, looking at performance in an organization? And it really starts with the measurement development stuff we've already talked about. But you have to think about, depending on the size of the organization and the needs for measurement at the time, usually it's not a great thing to try to do the organization all at one time. So you want to kind of phase it in. You want to try to focus on one program first, then maybe a couple of related programs, then maybe a department or a division, until finally you have the whole organization doing it. And that may take several years. But you want to start small and have some small successes early on to build momentum. Another early consideration is the notion of, how is this work going to be supported? Are you going to ask each manager from each program or each site, or however your organization is distributed, to do their own thing with performance measures? Are you going to have a performance measurement unit, or at least one person who's responsible for sort of making things consistent and there being a consistent approach? Um, this tension between centralized and decentralized approaches is important to think about and get right within an organization. I would say you need to do both. You need to have um, at least an individual, and hopefully a few individuals, whose focus it is to uh, facilitate measurement development and to generate the important performance reports for an organization, um, and then support the use of them. But at the same time, you want individual program managers and staff to participate in those development processes and to understand uh, the logic and the utility of the measurement process. You need buy-in from everybody, but you need somebody who's going to be paying sustained attention too. So that's just a balance that you have to walk. I mentioned involving frontline staff. You have to have the people doing the work involved, both for buy-in and because they bring knowledge and understanding of the processes that you otherwise can't get. Um, Within the measurement development process, of course, you have to consider um, funder mandates and measures that are required to be reported at the federal and state levels. And of course, there's still that alignment with organizational system and community strategies that all come into play. But once you have measures identified for a program or programs within the organization, then you have to start creating regular performance reports. And the regularity of them is important. It doesn't mean you have to issue one every 2.5 days, but regularity is important. Knowing that these reports will be issued on a quarterly basis and that there will be a review process related to them is very important. Remember that you might need different reports for different audiences. And when you do that, you have to think about both internal constituencies, people within your organization, and also perhaps people outside your organization that might find these reports of value. Just remember everything we talked about regarding Tufty, right? Because as you're developing these reports, you want them to be easy to use and easy to understand. And those principles regarding data display become very important then. Also remember the RBA concept of the story behind the baselines. Whenever you report measurement information, make sure you're providing enough context and enough interpretation so that people can understand them appropriately, and that way you avoid misinterpretation or misuse of them potentially. Think about multiple delivery mechanisms, like of course you have paper reports or PDFs that you email to people, but then you might also have a website that serves these up on a regular basis. And when you do things on the web, you can perhaps get into more elaborate drill down structures where you can start to disaggregate information. And that's both using formal business intelligence tools and things like Tableau. But you could also do something kind of mechanically, even in Excel, to get those drill downs going. And then this is critical. Remember that once a performance report is designed, it doesn't mean that it should never change. And as people begin to use these reports, you're going to hear, oh, well, this doesn't really add much. This isn't presented in the best way. We need this additional piece of information. Because of that, you really have to think of performance reports as living documents. They should be stable. They shouldn't change from quarter to quarter so that you're never measuring the same thing twice. But you should also be flexible if they require update. You should make those changes that are required. So there's that tension between stability and flexibility. Really, one of the most important things is once you issue the reports, if they're going to be of value, they have to be used. And they won't be used if there's no expectation for their use or if their use is not supported. And that's through the creation of a regular review process. And that usually or should come from the top down. There should be an executive emphasis on the use of performance reports for continuous improvement. But also, once the managers understand what they should do, the managers should drive that, but involve staff at all levels of the organization when they do so. It's really important to have cross-functional participation when you review and diagnose performance problems. People from different parts of the organization, people that might lend a different perspective. Remember that whole caveat about avoiding solutions in search of problems. You got to make sure that's always emphasized in these review processes, together with just doing a real diagnosis before you move to solutions. And remember that the big three of diagnosis, the big three categories: policies and process, customer characteristics, and environmental factors. For certain measures, performance targets might be appropriate. Those should also be phased in. First, by saying these are what we think the targets might be, and then these are what the targets are, and then we're now going to really try to act when we see a measure where we're missing the target. But that should be a phased-in process if staff are not used to being held accountable for meeting performance targets. And then finally, this whole process should...
It's 4 o'clock.
Thank you very much. This whole process should be supported with regular technical assistance and feedback. So that means there should be kind of, as you go along, creating this process within the organization, probably multiple times for different programs and different departments. You start to create sort of an internal user network. And it's important that people, you start to identify people that can be helpful to others who are just starting the process, kind of peer support. And then you also have that same network, but external to the organization, right? So you build both internal and external networks of support for measurement. Later on, when you see the Ron and Ann presentation, we'll talk about the RBA Practitioners Network, which is a really good example of an external peer support network. You also want to provide multiple forms of technical assistance. So we're talking about, maybe a glossary and some frequently asked questions kind of things on the web, or you could also have the ability to do phone or Zoom contacts. And then the ultimate kind of technical assistance, of course, is in person, helping to work through a particular performance issue or interpretation issue of a performance measure. And then along with all of that, you want to acknowledge successes. When something has resulted in a success, using data to make a change and that actually improves performance, that should be advertised and celebrated. And if you try things that don't work, you should debrief those things, deconstruct them. Okay, why do we think it didn't work? Was it in the implementation of our potential solution, or did we just choose the wrong solution? You should continue to work on it, but stay positive with it. Okay, so with that, that's all I have to talk about, and that's outside of the presentation that Ann and I will be doing. So next week, we are going to all be together live at 6:30 on Zoom, which should be fun. And I'm in the midst of talking with all of you about your final projects. I'm excited to see those. So until then, enjoy your week, and I'll talk to you next Thursday. Bye now.